Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Wine Investigators. Tonight we are going to be talking about international grape superstar Cabernet Sauvignon. One thing that I found confusing when I started studying wine was that American wines were labeled by grape, and therefore, if you had an idea of the grape you were dealing with, that you kind of knew what to expect to a certain degree. It's obviously things vary in quality, but certain characteristics were, definitely suggested. Whereas European wines, being identified by place could be super confusing. So, talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, you should know that, it's labeled as a varietal in Australia, the United States, and a great deal of the world. In France, in Bordeaux, which is the home of Cabernet Sauvignon, it is, as aforementioned, classified by where it's from. In Bordeaux, generally speaking, Cabernet Sauvignon is blended with other grapes. The most notable ones include Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. In the United States and in Australia, it is much more common to see it as a single varietal, although we do see Cabernet Shiraz blends in Australia as well. But sticking with Bordeaux, on the left bank, communes like Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint-Julien are on the Cabernet side of the equation. On the right bank, Merlot is predominantly the main grape, although it is blended with Cabernet Sauvignon and other aforementioned grapes. But on the left bank, Cabernet is king. It's usually the primary blending grape in red Bordeaux. If you move down to Entre-deux-Mers, which is where the wine we're going to be tasting tonight is from, you do see more Merlot-dominated wines, but in this case, it actually is a Cabernet-dominated wine. Much as when we discuss Chardonnay, the sort of ticket for California winemakers was the Judgment of Paris, quote unquote, in 1976, where in the case of the Reds, Stag's Leap's SLV, 1973, went up against such storied first growth wines, we'll get back to that, as Mouton Rothschild and Haut-Brion, and it won. And these were French judges, so that kind of put American Cabernet making on the map. But if you're talking about French Cabernets, as I mentioned, they are predominantly blends. They tend to be more vegetal in style. You're going to get more bitter herbs notes in addition to the black currant and cassis and graphite. I know it sounds kind of gross, but it is accurate, which you do get in the California examples, but the California cabs in general, stylistically, especially in the 80s, 90s, and well into the aughts, were all about power. Wines like Silver Oak, wines that you could eat or drink when you ate steak. But you do find a greater concentration on balance at this point in California as well as in Washington State, which in Walla Walla and Red Mountain make some really beautiful, 100% Cabernets and also Cabernet Bordeaux style blends. In California, those Bordeaux style blends are commonly referred to as Meritages. So, moving into the New World, in California, both Napa and Sonoma are probably the most prestigious places to grow Cabernet Sauvignon in AVAs such as Howell Mountain, Diamond Mountain, and various other places in Napa, and in Sonoma, Sonoma Mountain, and Alexander Valley. If you move into Australia, you find terrific Cabernet Sauvignon from Margaret River, McLaren Vale, and also the Barossa Valley. And unlike Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon does tend to do rather well in warmer areas, as it is a later ripener. And the interesting thing about it is they are small berries, and that's where you're really going to get your tannic concentration because there's a lot of skin versus not a lot of flesh, so to speak. So, in any case, that's kind of the quick rundown. Moving back to France, when you start studying Bordeaux, you always come back to the 1855 classifications, which were heavily weighted towards the Médoc and, kind of left the right bank alone, doubtlessly for political reasons. And I think with the exception of Margaux, which had some rough years in the 60s and 70s, the top five first growths, quote unquote, Chateau Mouton Rothschild, Chateau Lafite Rothschild, Chateau Aubryon, etc., are still of great quality. But when you're looking at the so-called second, third, fourth, and fifth growths, there's been a minute since 1855, and certainly a wine like Chateau Lynch-Bages, is not of a fifth category quality. So that's kind of the deal with that. We're going to taste a wine, as I said, from Entre Deux Mers, Cabernet dominated. This is Chateau Le Berger. One thing that you see a lot in Bordeaux, and certainly in New World winemaking as well, is you sort of have your different ranges of wine. This is their less expensive, which they'll refer to as second or third labels. So we're gonna give this guy a swirl. And you have a nice powerful nose. You get a kind of almost a grilled meat aroma here. And definitely that classic cassis, blackberry, dark chocolate. On the palate, it's nice and chewy. It's rich. I'm definitely getting dark chocolate big time. As well as, not overwhelming oak influence. So, a little primer on Cabernet Sauvignon. Always a pleasure to speak to you all, and good night.